Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm joined with Jay, who's going to introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Jay. I helped to produce the new documentary called Feeling Blue, which is about mental health at Cambridge.
One that probably everyone says, I think the workload is immense.
A bit of a joke amongst my friends that there are always people crying in the library. It's not really that funny actually.
Excess workload in some subjects.
After my first term, I basically done an entire first year chemistry, biochemistry and physiology course.
I didn't realise till I came here just how hard the student worked.
The intensity of the competition.
In my first term I had 16 essays in 8 weeks.
A particular competitive, intense environment.
8-week periods of chronic stress and anxiety and worries.
The shortness of the
terms.
Very short terms.
Horrible fucking bullshit. Why are they so short?
Constant stress. Pressure cooker of Cambridge workload.
Heavy workload.
highly intense.
Exam pressures.
Stressful environment.
Stress. Workload in Cambridge is
Super intense. Very stressful.
exhausting. Astronomical.
Pressure.
Stress.
Pressure.
Pressure.
Could not keep up.
Pressure.
High workload.
Pressure.
Stress.
Stress.
At all.
And I graduated a year ago, and we've kind of been researching ever since. Yeah, Magda has very kindly devoted a video to talking about mental health at Cambridge, which is increasingly becoming like one of the main issues, even though it hasn't been talked about much until recently. Do you feel like, I mean, you've kind of arrived in the past year. I'm curious to know, do you feel like it's an open discussion?
I don't think a lot is said about it, in all honesty. Like, so they make it clear that there's support available to some extent, and they'll talk about like, if you're struggling, go to this person, but there's not really so much a discussion about it.
Yeah, who's they?
So, for example, in like Freshers Week, we would have talks, and I can't remember who gave the talks, but they said you have welfare, college nurse, tutor, go to them if there's any problems.
Yeah, that was similar to my experience, I think. And then on top of that, some of my supervisors would ask me if I was okay. But depending on the supervisor, I may or may not have been comfortable talking about personal issues with them. And for some supervisors I really was, and like they were the main person I talked to. But I mean, actually one of the main things we've been trying to discuss with the university is that it's quite hard to know what level of training your supervisor has had. Same with your tutor, who's in charge of all of your sort of pastoral picture. I approached my supervisors often on the basis that like I knew them quite well, or actually that they were younger than the rest of my supervisors and sort of closer to my age. So I felt like they were closer to what I was going through. When we looked into it, we found that there is mandatory training for supervisors, but it doesn't include mental health as far as we can see. And there is mental health training for supervisors, but we have no reason to believe it's mandatory. And we're pretty sure that it's not paid, which means that in practice most supervisors just can't afford, like they can't afford to take the time out of a working day to go to that.
And I think like, because your supervisors are the people that you're most likely to see anyway, it would be probably most worth to give them the training.
Yeah.
To be able to deal with problems like that.
Definitely. And porters as well. I spoke to porters an awful lot. Just because they're not inside the academic part of the institution. Like they're pretty much the only person you can find in Cambridge easily who's not an academic, at least in college. And that really makes a difference, especially when you're like feeling really bad about your academic work. You know, like an exam hasn't gone well, or you have got some really critical feedback on something you've done. I have a friend who went to a Director of Studies meeting and came out of it and told me that his Director of Studies had told him that if he didn't get a 2-1 in his upcoming mock exams, that he would be pulled out of rowing. I'm not even sure how that would have worked, because like that's not a power that your Director of Studies has.
Yeah.
Academics can't just stop you from doing. I mean, maybe he would have found a way, but it's very odd.
And I think again that's like a college thing, like where you go and who you have like looking after you, I guess. So like for me, my DOS is really kind of like supportive of extracurriculars and stuff, and he literally tells us every time like he meets with us, I just need you to pass and that's all I want you to do. And I think if we were put under any more pressure than that, it would have been so much worse this year. So I'm quite like lucky in that respect that like the only pressure I had was kind of mostly coming from myself rather than other people telling me like, oh, you need to get a 2-1, you need to get a first, kind of thing.
Yeah. I had some supervisors who said you can choose what grade you get. And also my DOS. I remember making some decisions about papers which I wanted to take because I knew I wasn't very good at them, at those areas, and I wanted to get better. And my DOS was supportive of that, which was really great. Equally, there were some other supervisors who told me that given that I apparently had the capacity to get a first, that is absolutely what I should be doing, particularly with my final year. And yeah, I mean, people tell you things all the time, and you know, life would get a bit overwhelming for everyone if they took everything to heart. But the reality is Cambridge supervisors have a lot of sort of social power over the student, I think. And particularly when they're an older supervisor and thus more likely to be a world-leading academic. And all of the college setups with like fellows being allowed to walk on the grass and fellows having their own like special high table on a plinth at dinner, like you can't claim that you know, academics are not deliberately put in a position of superiority over the students, as much as a lot of them are very approachable and friendly and like try and shrug off all the superiority stuff. There are concrete reasons like high table and like walking on the grass where it just kind of feels like there's this nagging voice that keeps saying these people are really senior and they know what they're talking about and you should never contradict them. And that means it really matters what your supervisor says you should do, because like on the whole people really listen. Have you by and large had approachable and friendly supervisors this year?
Yeah, I think they were all friendly. I think just like me as a person, I'm quite shy anyway, so I found especially like one of them was quite intimidating just because he was a lot older and he like supervised for like 30 years. So I was just like,
I know the type.
maybe like I wouldn't have felt comfortable talking to him really, but
yeah,
they were all like nice, I guess. So I think if I had needed to talk to them, it probably would have been okay.
Yeah. One of the big issues for me is I didn't know how far the conversation would go. Like, in principle, they should be keeping all personal stuff confidential unless, this is purely what I think, unless there is a reason for them to suspect that like you're at immediate risk of danger or harm of some kind, or somebody is. But I heard so many stories of like things that people had revealed to an academic or a member of college just being shared amongst the college tutorial team. And I don't believe that that's out of sort of malice or any kind of gossiping. I just think, as we kind of said about training, I would have thought that was because that particular person just hadn't been offered really good training on confidentiality. I'm also curious to know, as like a first year, if you wanted to know something about like what your route should be, you know, like what your route of referral should be, like who should you go to if you have a mental health crisis versus like a problem with work, or like how is a tutor different from the college nurse, and like which should you go to in what situation? Do you have a clear picture of that, or would you just prefer to go to like whoever you know best?
I think at the beginning, again, they said go to your DOS for like academic issues, go to your tutor for personal issues, and then go to the nurse just for like health and well-being, I guess. But I don't know where it would go beyond that. And like personally, I feel like I felt most comfortable talking even about kind of my situation with my DOS, just because I felt like my tutor wouldn't really understand, because she was a tutor, a DOS for AIMS.
Yeah.
So
and AIMS is
Asian and Middle Eastern Studies.
Yeah.
So
very much the humanities.
Didn't really understand, and like obviously it's not her fault, but she didn't really understand what being a medical student was like. And I felt that even if I did go and talk to her about my problems, like we wouldn't get very much further than just discussing it.
Like there is a huge amount of people who want to help. One of the things that I found really like slightly kind of disorientating was the nurse in my college when I was there was only like in their office about, it was like 4 hours a day, I think Monday to Friday. So definitely the best person to respond to a mental health crisis, and the person who did respond, and like amazingly well, when I had a mental health crisis. But I was really lucky that it happened like in the middle of the working day during a working week. And if it hadn't happened at that time, probably the porters would have been the first people to hear about it. Which also, like, as it happens, my college has wonderful porters, and I would have been very happy with that. But they, and again, I don't know, because we have struggled to figure out who has had what training, but they, I have no doubt, have had very different professional experience and levels of training from the college nurse. I should say that the university's response to what we've produced so far has been really positive, which we're really happy about. Like what we wanted to do overall, like from the beginning, was to try and help the people within the university who are already and always actually trying to improve things for students, which I think is most people within university. The question now is, like, I mean, there are still lots of unanswered questions. I just feel as a former student that there are a lot of things that would have been really reassuring to know about. Things like, is supervisor mental health training mandatory for all I know, it still could be. We just haven't been able to find out. But if it's not, then I feel like that's something students need to know.
Yeah, I think there's just like sometimes so little communication with the students that like don't really know what's going on.
Yeah.
At all. So
What?
You just like follow the system and you go to supervisions and like you get told like this is who you talk to with this, but
Yeah.
there's nothing really beyond that.
Yeah. You're kind of dependent on just like which tutor and supervisor and DOS you get as to what information you get given. And there's no real central place where you can go and find out what the university has been doing on mental health recently, which is a lot. Or, you know, what the intermission process is. There is a new intermission process. It has been made public. I think one of our team managed to find it on the websites of 3 of the colleges out of 31, 33, something like that. So, and there is a page on intermission on the, I think it's educational policy, at least that's where the new mental health and wellbeing strategy is hosted. Some of this information is really hard to find, and there isn't a central place where people go to talk about it. I mean, there is, and it's Facebook groups, which is not ideal because Facebook groups don't contain anyone from the university to like myth bust or fact check anything, and none of the probably very valuable discussions and data that are shared in Facebook groups are ever going to be seen by the university. The Twitter and Instagram accounts for Cambridge University have hardly any discussion of mental health, as far as I can see. The University Counselling Service Twitter feed doesn't even, hasn't tweeted for over 2 years, I think. It just seems a little bit odd from an institution that claims that it wants to open up the discussion around mental health. Like, that would seem to be one of the main, if not one of the main avenues, then at least fairly indispensable. There's a number in the undergraduate prospectus, apparently, for the number of hours per week that a Cambridge student should be doing academic work. Do you want to guess what it is?
I feel like it'll be something like 40, right?
It's 46.
46. Which is not. You can't.
Yeah.
I think it is a problem, people telling you that you don't have to do as much work as you really actually do have to do, because then
people underestimating the amount of work.
This is going off topic, but just the competitiveness, or not so much but comparing yourself to other people, because I know that especially in exam term, so I would go to sleep at 10, and then I'd wake up the next morning and see people in the library at 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And then it's you feel oh, I should be up that late and I should be working, why am I not working? And then you just kind of dig yourself into this hole of spending your whole day doing hours and hours and hours of work.
I guess that would be less of a problem if it wasn't actually kind of necessary to work at 1 a.m. sometimes.
Yeah.
I remember being told by, I can't remember who it was, but it was an academic who told me that you should only need to do 1 all-nighter a term. Which at the time when I was doing, 1 all-nighter a week to get my work done, felt pretty lenient and kind of gentle. But now that I've graduated and, moved into the working world, and now that I've read a book about sleep, it just kind of seems insane to suggest that you should ever do an all-nighter at all. That's simply not healthy
Yeah.
in any, like for anyone.
And I think like if that's coming from someone who like has some authority,
Yeah.
it's like you're gonna think, oh, I really need to
Right.
do it.
Yeah, I'm then gonna be worried when I haven't done an all-nighter yet.
Yeah. To be fair, I think in a lot of cases it is like students that put the pressure on themselves and like that do it to themselves, which
definitely.
is quite bad. But I think, especially in the documentary, I think it was mentioned like it's people who come here are normally already people who like overwork themselves to some extent and like want to get the best grades, and then when you get here and you're suddenly like not doing as well as you were doing at A level, and then you feel like you have to work 50 times harder just to get back to that level, and you're already used to spending hours and hours.
And then someone tells you to do an all-nighter. Given that people come in with that kind of mentality, sometimes there's a limited amount that the university can do about it. But one of the things that could definitely be made very clear is that people should sleep.
Yeah.
Like that would not be a difficult thing to communicate to students. It's kind of even encouraged, you know, the May balls go on all night and have a survivor's photo at 6 a.m. Like it's very much enculturated this idea that staying up for 24 hours once in a while is kind of like somehow part of a normal life. Perhaps I should say, do you know anyone who does always allow themselves enough sleep?
Yeah, like actually, yeah, so one of the other medics at my college was always like, in exam term it kind of broke down.
Yeah,
I think, but before that it was always like, get 8 hours sleep a night. And I found that to be like, not achievable for me, but like it was great that they were doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were like, especially in Lent term for me, there was 1 week, I think it was Lent term, that like I think I averaged like 4 hours sleep a night, and that was just the worst week ever.
Why was that?
I think I was doing my essays at like 1 a.m.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know how common this is at other UK universities, but in Cambridge, pretty much once a term, you get a week where there is just like deadline after deadline, where if it's not like a deadline every 2 days, it's, you know, 4 deadlines on the Thursday, and then no deadlines for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Which, again, is something that everybody has to deal with at some point, or a lot of people have to deal with in their working life. But to throw that at somebody when they're 18, and when they, you know, having just arrived at a very prestigious institution that they've been working really hard to get to, they're unlikely to come in and challenge that and just be like, no, I don't like the sound of that, I'm going to spread out my workload. I did at some points feel able to turn down work, but it was only towards the end of my second year that I started doing that, and it was only after completely burning out at the end of first year and spending all of second year trying to recover and realizing that I wasn't going to fail if I didn't complete the whole reading list. I mean, also reading lists, most people having come from school will have been expected to sort of do everything, you know, you get set a list and you do everything on the list, otherwise you have unfinished work. It's never really explained, particularly in humanities subjects, that no one is expected to read the entire reading list for every paper. It's where you go when you want to read up about something. It's like not a homework list.
So like we didn't really get reading lists. We got like, well, sort of like at the start of every lecture series, but I don't think I ever even looked at mine. It's just like there's already so much.
Yeah. The other part of it is when you get given an impossible amount of work, which I would be willing to bet every Cambridge student does at some point, you just kind of feel like you're not good enough when you don't get it done.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of tragic and unnecessary. Nobody gets everything done all the time. But when you put people in a situation where they're sort of chronically being given more work than they can possibly do, like, you never feel like you're on top of things.
Yeah.
At least during term time, I was like, I fell behind in week 5 of my first year, and then I stayed behind until my final exams. That was the feeling I had throughout my entire degree, was I was like perpetually behind.
I think like that's especially because, so like during A-levels, you literally just have a syllabus and you just learn it and then that's it. Whereas here, there's always something else you can do, and that's been like a major feeling during first year, like amongst so many people that I've talked to as well. Like, you always feel like you're just floating and like you're never actually doing well.
Yeah. Surviving,
and you're
not
never
thriving.
and you're never like actually on top of anything, and that's just so like demoralizing, because even people who spend so much more time on work than I did, they still don't feel like they're on top of it. And then that also makes you think, like, if they're not on top of it, how far behind am I?
A lot of these things are really big changes for people coming from school, right? The idea that you can't possibly read everything there is to know about your subject. And if you're going to kind of change people's perspectives in that way, then it is really difficult, but it needs to come from like every person in the institution, and like manageable workloads and plenty of sleep and prioritizing your own well-being. They all need to be like part of the culture of the institution, and at the moment I think lots and lots of people really do value those things here, but they're very much not part of the culture. In fact, I'd say the opposite. Genuinely, I became concerned about a lot of my friends, people saying things like, you know, oh, it's fine, I can manage on giving myself 7 hours a night, at least for 3 years. And yeah, 7 hours a night is probably okay for some people. It's at the very minimum end of what kind of, to the best of our scientific knowledge now, is the like optimum amount of time to give yourself. But you know, what happens when you have to wake up early to go rowing, or you can't get to sleep very fast because you've been working like until you go to bed, and then you've been staring at a computer screen all day, or you know, that like inevitably there are going to be times when you don't get enough sleep, and it's going to impact your academic performance as well as your sort of emotional well-being.
So I think we'll leave it there. So thank you very much for watching, and thank you to Joe for filming with me. I'll have the documentary and all the unanswered questions and findings linked in the description box, so you should go watch the documentary. And yeah, that's basically it. So I'll see you in my next video.
Bye bye.
Bye.